Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we unravel the haunting tale, A Square of Canvas, by Anthony M. Rudd. What you are about to hear is not a mere retelling. It is a reimagined narration in English, reshaped to captivate modern audiences while preserving the chilling essence of the original masterpiece.
"No, madam, I am not insane." His voice rang with a strange dignity, though his eyes glimmered with something deeper. "I see the smile you try to hide. Do not bother concealing it. You are new here, and you know nothing of my story. I do not fault you. The burden of proof lies upon us, does it not?" He gestured toward the ward around us. "You have already met our curious company, I imagine? Conquerors, courtesans, prophets, and queens, if you believe their claims. Alexander the Great, Richelieu, Caesar, Spartacus, Cleopatra, all gathered here in this masquerade of madness. But I am no delusion. I am Hal Pemberton." I froze. Could this kindly, silver-haired man truly be the infamous genius whispered about in legend? His gaze sharpened. "You doubt me? Look closer. Time has carved its lines upon me, yes, but if you have ever seen Gauguin's portrait in the Metropolitan, painted when I visited Tahiti, then you know." My breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable. The temptation to flee clawed at me, yet I remained. After all, they allowed him freedom of the grounds. Surely he was no more dangerous than the so-called Cleopatra I had just left, stroking her pet serpent with a smile too wide. I believe you," I stammered, though my voice betrayed hesitation. His face brightened, as though my recognition alone shattered the absurdity of his confinement. "They call me Chase here, John Chase," he whispered, leaning closer. "But would you care to hear the truth? The tale of an artist persecuted, misunderstood, condemned by bigotry." He broke off, curling one long, elegant finger toward a bench bathed in sunlight just beyond the spray of the fountain. I hesitated, measuring the distance to the guard nearby. The legends of this man were dark, twisted, and filled with whispers of death in Polynesia. Yet curiosity outweighed fear. I followed, settling cautiously at the far end of the bench as he prepared to unveil his story. "You are the first who has not mocked me upon hearing my true name," he said, his voice trembling with both pride and bitterness. He kept the distance between us, and I was grateful for it. "Ignorance placed me here. Ignorance keeps me here. But I will tell you everything, madam. Then you may carry my truth beyond these walls, and the world will demand my release. For 9 years, intolerance has stolen my life, my career, and worst of all," he leaned closer, whispering with a conspiratorial glance, "they forbid me to paint."
His eyes burned with fury. "My youth, my training, yes, they are known in fragments. Alden Sephiroth wrote his little brochure, but he captured only the surface. His sketches of buildings, his words about me, they are hollow. He was nothing more than a fine camera, recording dimensions faithfully, but blind to the most vital one, the soul. Inspiration, the divine spark, the hunger that the world calls yen, that has been my life. Technique is nothing without it. Tutelage is nothing without it. Strip all of that away, and still you would find me, aflame with creation." He straightened, his voice rising with defiance. "I am of the Long Island Pembertons. My sisters live still, staid, respectable women who married well. To hell with them. They called me a disgrace. Those smug hypocrites. They never understood. My mother was Sheila Varro, a singer of brilliance. My father, a dull man of insurance and figures. No madness in my blood, no hereditary taint. Only my mother's fire, her gift, her curse. I was slow as a child, yes, but education and inspiration lit the spark within me. That story I will tell you soon. His tone darkened, almost confessional. As a boy, I despised school. Before I was 10, 3 academies had expelled me. I was cruel, yes, cruel to other boys, because lessons bored me. Facts, repetition, the static pursuit of knowledge, none of it ever held me. Only the restless, consuming flame of creation could command my attention. When I grew bored of tormenting smaller boys, pins in their flesh, hair yanked from their heads, I turned to opponents my own size. They beat me often, but defeat never mattered. Pain, blood, the heat of combat, these were curiosities to me, detached, almost clinical. As long as I could stand, I would strike for the nose, the eyes, delighting in the involuntary grimace, the crimson stream from shattered flesh. His voice hardened. Father tried the public schools of New York, but I lasted scarcely 6 weeks. My classmates despised me. My teachers whispered of abnormality. I had done nothing, save one small experiment. A pin, stolen from a woman's hat, placed carefully in the sleeve of the principal's coat. When his hand slid inside, the steel pierced his palm. His cry of pain echoed down the hall. I was outside his office, savoring the image of blood dripping from his wounded hand. Later, when they traced the act to me, Mr. Mortensen wore his hand in bandages. He leaned back, almost amused. Father abandoned the schools then and hired tutors. 3 men came, one after another, and I broke them all. I shirked, I feigned illness, I engineered accidents that left them injured. It was not that I could not learn, I knew I could. But algebra, geography, language, all of it was lifeless to me. Only zoology stirred my interest, and none of those men could teach it properly. His eyes narrowed, recalling. Then came Jackson, the 4th, and the last. A patient man, a scientist of sorts. For 2 weeks he tried to mold me into what Father desired, but he soon discovered the truth. I responded only when given living creatures to study. Animals, breathing, moving, suffering. They alone held my fascination.
One afternoon, after a fruitless lesson in my studies, Jackson left me with a tray of beetles to classify. The day was stifling, and the heat stirred the little creatures into frantic motion beneath the glass cover that held them captive. Curiosity overcame me. I lifted them out, one by one, and with the point of my penknife performed small, deliberate mutilations. Wings severed, legs removed, antennae sliced away. Then I crouched low, peering through a hand lens, watching their desperate convulsions. Here was life stripped bare, pain, struggle, the shadow of death looming close. I was entranced. When one faltered, slowing in its movements, I pressed the heated tip of a pin against its body, forcing it to writhe again. At 16, I could not explain the fascination, but now I know. The artist within me was awakening, intoxicated by the most primal of spectacles, the struggle against death itself. A fever burned in my veins. I longed to preserve the moment, to capture it before it vanished. I seized a pencil and scrawled a paragraph, imagining myself beneath a giant's glass, my limbs torn away, my body pierced by a blade, a red-hot dagger, while unseen eyes watched my agony.
Yet the words were clumsy, lifeless. They failed me. Driven by instinct, I tore a clean sheet from my tablet and began to sketch, wildly, furiously. I had never drawn before, but the vision demanded form. Before my eyes, the image took shape. The raw protest of life against death. By the time Jackson returned, the fire had burned itself out. The sketch lay finished, grotesque and trembling with the energy of its creation. All but one of the beetles lay overturned beneath the glass, legs stiff in the air. The lone survivor dragged itself across the table, leaving a faint trail of pale blood behind. Exhausted, I collapsed into a chair, indifferent to whether I lived or died. Poor Jackson was horrified when he discovered what I had done to the beetles. His voice rose in righteous fury, condemning my cruelty, until his eyes fell upon the sketch. He froze. I watched him tremble, adjust his pince-nez, and stare at the crude drawing, then at the lifeless insects. His face twisted with anger and disbelief as he read the paragraph I had scrawled. Suddenly he leapt to his feet, clutching the papers as though they burned his hands. Without a word, he turned and fled. I never saw Jackson again. The poor fool.
An hour later, Father summoned me. I knew Jackson had gone to him, and I braced myself for another of those dreadful lectures, perhaps even a beating. In the past, Father's rage had driven him to flog me, his fury so violent it nearly broke his health. I dreaded it, my knees shaking as I entered his study. But this time was different. Father sat pale, defeated, the weight of disappointment heavy upon him. He did not storm nor raise his hand. His voice was quiet, resigned. Jackson had resigned, he said, declaring me impossible to teach. In a few sentences, Father reviewed the endless failures of my education. Every tutor had agreed. My lack of progress was not due to stupidity, but to a stubborn refusal to work. Then his tone hardened. So far, you have rejected every opportunity. Now we reach the end. Jackson has shown me a sketch of yours. He claims it reveals genuine talent. He advises that you be sent abroad to study art. Would you accept this final chance? Otherwise, I will place you in an institution, a reform school, where you can no longer disgrace me. I tell you plainly, Hal, I am ready to wash my hands of you. What choice did I have? Paris was inevitable. Father arranged my admission to Guarnarezi's grand studios, paid a year in advance, and granted me a generous allowance. At our parting, his words cut deeper than any punishment. I do not wish you to return, Hal. Your allowance will continue only so long as you remain abroad. If success comes to you, I will welcome you again, but not before. The Pembertons have never been failures, nor parasites. And so I left him. He died during my 3rd year at the studio, and by his command I was not told until after the funeral. When the letter came, I wept, not for his death, but for the certainty that I could never restore the pride I had stolen from him. Had he lived another decade, I might have redeemed myself. My years with Guarnarezi need little detail. You know something of them already. It was there I discovered my true calling. I could paint. The maestro himself never praised me highly, but he taught with relentless diligence. In line and shadow, I surpassed many of his pupils, though in color he found me lacking. Yet in my mind, riots of crimson, orange, and purple surged like storms, colors that refused to blend upon my palette. I blamed the subjects, of course.
a coward's excuse. Consider the nudes Guarneresi assembled. Half a dozen withered women, their skins sallow, their torsos skeletal, their breasts shriveled. He demanded we portray youth and beauty upon such decay. I could not. Instead, I sought inspiration in the night cafes, sketching the poses of courtesans whose bodies still carried allure. It was more vivid, more honest, but still unsatisfying. The truth of beauty eluded me, even as I chased it through shadows and memory.
5 years I had labored in Guarneresi's studio, wandering through winters in Sicily, Sardinia, and Italy. Yet the solution to my torment eluded me. Then, one sweltering July afternoon, when the faithful students had fled north for respite, I remained alone in the cavernous studio. On one side stood the cages, rabbits, white mice, a red fox, living models for beginners. Aimless, desperate for inspiration, I drifted near them. One rabbit turned its gaze upon me. Sunlight poured through the skylight, striking its eyes until they glowed like discs of molten scarlet. The sight ignited something buried deep. In that instant, memories of my boyhood cruelties surged back. The mutilated beetles, the fever of their struggles. Blood pounded in my temples. Life was before me, and death could be summoned. The old inspiration could be reborn. With trembling stealth, I locked the door, drew the shades, and approached the cage. My hands seized the creature by its ears. Its warmth, its frantic pulse, drove me into frenzy. I dragged a table into the light, pressed the animal down, and drew my knife. The rabbit writhed, but I was stronger. I carved deep incisions across its white body, and the blood welled forth. A delirium of delight consumed me. My fingers shook as I mixed the paints, yet there was no hesitation, no muddiness, only clarity, only fire. I painted as though possessed. Perhaps you have seen the result. The canvas was titled The Lusts of the Magi. Today it hangs in Paris Gallery, destined one day for the Louvre. And all of it, every stroke, every hue, was born from the sacrifice of a single white rabbit's heart's blood. The next morning, Guarneresi entered the studio and found me collapsed upon the floor, exhausted, half asleep. Demanding an explanation, he was met only with my silent gesture toward the canvas on the easel. At first I thought he would rage. His eyes narrowed, his beard bristled, but then, as he gazed upon the painting, his expression shifted. His mouth fell open, and a stream of exclamations poured forth in his native tongue. His hands rose and fell in a gesture I knew well, unrestrained delight. Suddenly he lunged forward, seized the canvas, and fled down the street into the studio before I could react. I chased him, but he vanished. Half an hour later he returned with 4 other artists. They crowded around the painting, their voices overflowing with praise, declaring it the greatest work produced in the quarter in years. Guarneresi himself was quieter now, but I saw tears glisten in his eyes as he turned to me. "The pupil has become the master," he said simply. "Go. I did not teach you this, and I cannot teach you more. Yet I shall forever boast that Signor Pemberton painted his first great masterpiece in my studio." The following day I rented a studio of my own. I painted feverishly, but the fire that had birthed the lusts of the Magi was gone. A shadow of inspiration lingered, yet my canvases were mediocre. Though my skill with color had improved,
I soon realized the bitter truth. I could never summon that same fervor again, unless...
4 months passed, and in desperation I purchased another white rabbit. But when I repeated the ritual, horror struck me. No surge of inspiration came. The blood, the suffering, it no longer held power. My colors were brighter, yes, but the ecstasy was gone. I understood then. The lusts of the Magi had drained the stimulus that rabbits could provide. Disheartened, I let my work falter. Though I knew that one painting was magnificent, I could not bear to believe it was the summit of my art. Yet all that remained was the dull routine I had once mocked in lesser painters. Finally, I abandoned the brush altogether, surrendering to despair, absinthe, and endless cigarettes. Guarneresi came to me one day, finding me sunk in despair. He prescribed fresh air, sunshine, a change of scene. I refused. I knew my sickness was not of the body, but of the spirit. Still, he lent me his saddle mare, a magnificent black creature with white fetlocks and a star upon her brow. I agreed, half-heartedly, to ride her each day. 3 weeks passed. The exercise pleased me, yet the paralysis of my art remained. My body was sound, but my soul was weary. Slowly, the dreadful realization crept upon me. As an artist, I had spent my fire. Then, one cold afternoon beyond Passy, I dismounted to drink from a spring. Breaking the thin crust of ice, I quenched my thirst and led the mare to drink. As she raised her head, a shard of ice cut her cheek. I watched, as drops of blood welled bright against her dark skin. The sight struck me like lightning. In that instant, memories of the beetles, the rabbit, all my past cruelties surged back. I knew this animal had been given to me by Providence to rekindle the flame of inspiration. I prepared swiftly. A barn nearby became my studio. I fetched canvases, paints, and ropes. When all was ready, I bound the mare so she could not move. My heart recoiled, for I had grown to love her, but the fury of artistic desire consumed me. I did as I had done before. The next day, when the work was complete, I carried the canvas to Paris. Guarneresi beheld it and was overcome, declaring my genius reborn. Yet when I confessed the truth of the mare, his face blanched. He shuddered, his voice breaking as he cried, "Any but a man as great as you, Signor, I should kill for such a deed. You stand beyond the law that would damn another, but not beyond the reach of eternal hatred. You are great, but terrible. Go." No one wished to look at my painting. Guarneresi had whispered the truth to his friends, and the tale spread like wildfire through the quarter. I was shunned, abandoned by those who had once called me companion. A month later, nearly broken, I fled Paris for New York. In America, no one knew the story behind my canvas. When it was exhibited, the critics hailed it as greater than anything produced by my contemporaries. I sold it for $20,000, a fortune in those days. Popularity swept me along like a tide. In this country, once a man is celebrated, even his poorest works are devoured. Criticism dies when reputation is born. I discarded the canvases I had painted in Paris, and society women clamored for portraits. With no vision for a new masterpiece, I drifted into their demands. It was easy, lucrative, and required no imagination. 2 portraits a week, endless wealth, and 5 wasted years. Then came Beatrice. She was 19, radiant, her beauty striking me first as an artist's eye selects a model.
slim of waist and ankle, yet softened by the graceful curve of neck and shoulder. She carried a maturity beyond her years, which only deepened her allure. Her eyes were dark pools, alive with shifting currents of thought. The moment I gazed into them, I felt the wrench of true love. Many times before, I had believed myself in love, but beside Beatrice, I saw my folly. One evening, in Sebastian's Spice Gardens, the grand indoor echo of Candy's famed paradise, I gloried in her presence. Silk clung to her form, her beauty intoxicating. Desire consumed me. Before we parted, I asked her. She answered not with words, but by lifting her white arms to my neck, pressing her lips to mine with a fervor that carried the whole weight of love. That moment was the sweetest, the happiest of my life. We married and built our home upon Long Island. After 3 months of honeymoon bliss, we settled there, more in love than ever, if such a thing were possible. A year passed. 10 months of it I spent without touching a brush. It was idyllic, yet toward the end shame crept into my thoughts. Could the love of one woman truly extinguish ambition, silence the hunger for accomplishment? At last I returned to painting, portraits, nothing more. But happiness had made me impatient with such trifles. Wealth was no concern. We had more than enough for a lifetime. Portraiture felt hollow, a diversion. I dabbled for another year, never daring to attempt a serious work. Then came Beatrice bore me a daughter, and I resolved to begin again. Yet the struggle was the same as before. My technique was near perfection, my command of color sharpened by past frenzies, but I found myself unable to approach subjects tinged with the macabre, and the macabre had always been my gift, my obsession.
I fought against the instinct that urged me to repeat the experiment of the mare. In cold blood, I loathed the thought. Worse still, I feared that even if I tried, inspiration would not return. So I turned to landscapes, grim, sordid scenes. I painted the fish and milk carts of Hester Street, with ragged children playing in the filth. The canvas sold easily, yet I knew it was poor. Next, I painted a ghetto street on a rainy night, greasy mud glistening on cobblestones, a shapeless figure slouched in a doorway. Critics called it powerful. One even hailed me as the awakening of an American Franz Hals, but I knew better. Compared to the work born of true frenzy, this was sludge, slime. I despised it. Even waterscapes failed me. I began one canvas, 2 grimy tugs straining against the bulk of a Leviathan steamer, but halfway through I abandoned it. My hand felt slack, my mind dull, as though I drooled at the mouth while I worked. 2 years slipped away. They were happy enough when I was with Beatrice, but savage and desolate when I sat alone in the studio. My wife had blossomed into the full radiance of womanhood, retaining a modesty that only deepened her charm. At 33, both our bodies and minds were still ascending, still discovering new delights in love and affection. But within me burned a force that would not be silenced. I had been born to accomplish great things. Weak compromise, indulgence in domestic bliss, these only stoked the fire that consumed me when I was alone. I resisted for months, but in the end, ambition and lust overcame fear. I traveled to a distant town in New York State, purchased a fine-blooded mare, and repeated the experiment that had cost me Guanaresi's friendship in Paris. All in vain.
From the slaughter, I produced only a single grim canvas, painted weeks later when my revulsion had dulled. I titled it Cannibalism, a vision of African savages feasting upon human flesh. It was banned the moment I exhibited it, condemned by censors, unwanted by any patron. I despised it myself. At Beatrice's urging, I burned the canvas, yet the destruction only deepened the fury in my heart. I swore I must do better. I will not dwell on the month that followed, another cycle of frenzy and self-loathing. But then, inspiration came again, as before, by accident. Beatrice was in the garden, cutting weeds with a sickle. I sat cross-legged nearby, watching. Her presence always soothed me, her supple body moving with the grace of raw animal force, and in that moment, the spark returned.
The sickle slipped. Beatrice cried out, and I rushed to her side, binding the wound. Yet in that instant, as I saw the crimson stain upon her perfect skin, a madness surged within me. My temples throbbed, my hands shook. This was fate, inevitable, undeniable. She was my muse, my mate, and destiny demanded her sacrifice for the masterpiece I was born to create. I told her nothing. Instead, I prepared the studio with meticulous care, the canvas, the tools, the setting. When she came at my call, she laughed at first, thinking it a jest. But as my preparations unfolded, laughter gave way to terror. Her eyes, once pools of love, widened with dread. I whispered my devotion, kissed her hair, her eyes, her lips, then turned to the canvas. And there, in a frenzy unlike any I had ever known, I painted. Inspiration consumed me, a fire greater than any before. Each stroke carried the weight of destiny. This was not mere art, it was revelation. Hours passed in delirium. I painted with abandon, intoxicated by creation itself. When at last the spell broke, I heard my daughter's cries from the next room, and descended to find the servants pale with horror. They had discovered Beatrice. The police came swiftly. I cared nothing for their accusations, nor for the scandal that followed. My only concern was the canvas, the masterpiece born of love and sacrifice. I hid it away in a secret place, untouchable, sacred. They could take me, condemn me, lock me away, but the painting remained. My triumph endures. I was not always in chains, oh no. 3 years after my confinement, old friends contrived my escape and spirited me away to the South Seas. They gave me a studio, hoping I might paint again, yet I was guarded, never free. I painted, yes, but those canvases meant nothing to me. My mind was consumed only by one thing, the masterpiece hidden in the cupboard of my old studio. At last, I slipped my gods. Wandering for weeks in native boats, I made my way back to New York. I found the canvas, rolled it tight, and concealed it upon my person. Then, willingly, I surrendered myself. They brought me here again. Imprisonment no longer mattered. Age had crept upon me, but I cared little, for I carried my masterpiece always, close to my heart. "See," I cried, tugging at the bundle hidden beneath my blouse. My fingers trembled with eagerness as I unfastened the roll. "See, madame," I repeated triumphantly. And before her horrified eyes, I unfurled it, revealing nothing but a blank square of white canvas.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature,
Do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.